So God remembers his people. He recalls his people. And you could talk a lot about anamnesis and what it means to recall. It doesn't necessarily entail forgetting, but God brings his people to the front of his mind, to speak somewhat metaphorically. And a very significant part of Christian life, or maybe the way in which you could describe Christian life in its entirety, is bringing the Lord to the front of your mind, is recalling the Lord. And so when we talk about prayer, as we did at the top of the hour, prayer is sometimes described after the manner of recollection, right? So you want to be continually in the presence of God. How do you do that? It's by recovering this Godward gaze. It's by having God always before your mind's eye. Why? Because you're afraid if you don't that you'll lapse into huge sin? No, but because this is what it means to be in the presence of the beloved. This is what it means to be caught up in covenant fidelity, right? To think longingly on, he whom my heart loves. And so memory is part of every aspect of human life. And if that's so, then it's present at the summit of human life in our relationship with God. And so being prudent, memorizing things, prayer, they're all not so much distinct facets of a human reality as they are kind of distinct expressions of the exercise of the intellect, which intellect, as made to the image of God, has a kind of upward trajectory, which comes to its perfection in prayer and worship.
And you and I were speaking before we went on air today about how we often kind of offload memory onto our spouse or our friends or those we live with, and how today it's like we offload stuff onto Google. And I've thought about... I'm beginning to find myself a little disappointed when people quickly, like, what's the name of that song? Oh, and they pull out their phone. And I haven't realized why that's been disappointing me. A lot of things disappoint me. But yeah, why is that a problem, and how does that negatively impact our memory?
Yeah. So I mean, just at the level of a gut reaction, I don't like it when people pull out their cell phones to settle trivial disputes in conversation, because I think one of the delightful aspects of conversation is just making stuff up,
Oh, okay.
Not in the sense of like making up false answers, but like a free space of speculation, because it's very fun. And because of the type of exercises that it entails. So it's like, who won the NBA championship in 2014?
Was it?
Yeah. It's like, that was kind of at the end of the golden years for the Celtics. Garnett had come over from the T-Wolves, and they had Rondo at that point, and Paul Pierce was still a good basketball player. But I think that their star had kind of begun to descend, and who was coming up at that time? I mean, the Spurs, they won 4 over the course of 20 years. I think that was Tim Duncan, was 2000, was Kawhi, was it, Danny, I think, because then you just rehearsed your knowledge of the basketball universe over the course of a decade, and you've been kind of reawakened as to the things that you did in, at the end of college, at the beginning of religious life. I didn't watch basketball in religious life at the beginning because I didn't know what was going on. I came back into my inheritance, as it were, later. But like, you have those kinds of conversations, which are meaningful human encounters, because the point of a human encounter isn't to settle, trivial questions so that you can be like, yes, it was the Spurs. It's like, who cares?
Yeah.
Right? It's like moving on, but to what? Because the thing that we could have done...
Something else we can settle by Google?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The thing that we could have done would have been delightful.
Yes.
And I think you just miss out on a lot of the delight of ordinary human interaction by settling, by appealing. And also, I mean, just as soon as a phone is on the table, or just as soon as a phone is brought out, the quality of the conversation just decreases. And I think everyone experiences this.
I'm a little tired of us complaining about all the negative things the phones do to us without us taking manful decisions to get rid of them.
Yeah.
Because it feels like more and more we're all kind of realizing this, but we're not doing anything powerful about it.
Yeah. We talked about this when you came on Godsplaining, the idea that a phone is
I've thought about that a lot, what you said.
A phone is for my convenience, but it interacts with other phones, which are for other person's convenience.
Yes.
And so you find yourself at a kind of convenience crossroads.
Yes.
And that when you take a violent decision for your own sanity, it does inconvenience others.
Yes.
And others don't necessarily have the wherewithal to process that in a way except as like, buh,
This just happened today. Sister Miriam texted me, a friend of mine, and I wrote back to her, and I'm like, thank you so much for checking in. I'm so glad you did. I'm going to be taking August off of the internet. I won't have my phone. I would have hated for you to reach out. But there's that like initial like fear the first few days of August. Like, people are going to be texting me, and I won't be texting them back, and they haven't watched this episode, or they don't know that I'm giving it up, and they're going to be offended.
Yeah. So every time I go from Switzerland to the United States, I switch my SIM card, and it's not like I send out a group text, on the Swiss number.
Yeah.
It's like people will continue to text the last number, and then they'll be somewhat confused for a couple days, and then they might remember, oh yeah, I'll bop over to the other number, or they might not, and that's that. because if I send out a big text to everyone that says, hey, then I'm not going to get any work done on my dissertation for 3 days because I'll just be like finishing up a bunch of text conversations with delightful people who are wonderful to communicate with. And I'm not posing that as like an obstacle in life. It's not why I'm there, which is tough to communicate without making it sound overly severe. But, it's just what it is. So I don't want people to think that I don't care for you, but I also don't want to be available in a way motivated by an anxiety to express that care.
So how do you thread that needle? That's the question.
Yeah, I think it looks different in every aspect. I mean, you do August. I do SIM card switch. I also don't respond to text messages in certain circumstances. So it's like I don't want to have a text string.
Yeah, I often don't. Especially if somebody's not even asking me a question. Like, hey, went to the beach today. Cool, don't care. Like, care a little bit. But if I say, awesome, what was it like? Now I'm committed to yet another thread of...
Yeah. So initial thoughts are, I think that we could do with more silencing of cell phones. And it doesn't have to be from this time to this time. But I think that it can just kind of be intermittent. So I went to Mass, I silenced my cell phone, I forgot to unsilence it a couple hours later. Because if there's something urgent that had come up, either it will or it won't.
This frustrates my wife to no end.
Yeah.
I not only have a full inbox, people are like, your inbox is full. I'm like, I know that. If it wasn't, you could leave a message and then I'd have to get back to you. But I also leave it on Do Not Disturb all day long. All day long. So people have to text and I don't even hear it vibrate. And then I check it. My wife, she's like, would you please take it off? And that's fair, but I won't.
Maybe you just you say, okay, this phone is for other people. For you, we have walkie-talkies.
Yeah. And then also people have, I think, differing degrees of being able to cope with this amount of information coming in.
Yeah.
Also, certain people just get a lot more text messages and emails than other people.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's probably true of me. Like, I think I do probably get a lot more emails and random direct messages from people than some other people. And then I cannot imagine being someone like Scott Hahn. Like, that guy must be bombarded all day long. Although he's probably not on social media. Or if he is, someone that's running it. But yeah.
No, I think, it's kind of tone setting too. There are different ways in which to be available to people. I was thinking about this past weekend because of this retreat. So, internet ministry. You talk to people in a certain way on the internet, but you don't necessarily have a relationship with them. If you do have a relationship with them, it's kind of a relationship of goodwill or of interest of a certain sort, but it's not of benevolence in the kind of thick way that you would see it described Aristotle, St. Thomas. And then here we are all together. There's 5 of us friars. There's maybe 70 people on the retreat, 70, 71. And there were just so many golden moments. We were sitting out on Saturday night. I was at a table with 8, 9, 10 people from all over the place. And we're smoking cigars and drinking beers and just talking about the good life. Mm-hmm. And it was like, yes, this is exactly the trajectory that the podcast ought to take. It's like human communion. Indeed. Right? In a way that was really seamless and natural. And it was cool because, we had a shuttle from LaGuardia that took folks to the retreat center so they didn't have to navigate Long Island on their own. And just from the moment that they got on the bus, everyone was talking to everyone else because they knew that they had a kind of common ground. Yeah. And that's what it ought to provide, a common ground for genuine communion. And, you find this or you...
Well, that was my experience of the Pints of the Aquinas retreat last year. It's like, these people are so cool.
Yeah.
And I didn't know them, and now I do. And
No,
but it is also weird, like you'd have that experience, people listen to Godsplaining, so they feel that they know you, so when they see you, they're like, and you're like, who are you?
Yeah, but like most people are just cool about it, they're like, hey, I appreciate the podcast, that's why I'm here, very grateful for it, and then it's like, so what's up? So you just kind of get over that in 7 seconds.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, and then you're just on to normal life. And I just met a handful of people by whom I was like, yo, these people are awesome.
Yeah, I know.
Just kind of impressed.
I frequently have that experience of meeting somebody and then realizing, I think to myself, yesterday I didn't know you existed, and now that I know you do, the world is better to me. I often have that. Like, I'll encounter these incredible faithful priests or these amazing families. I'm like, wow, like yesterday I had a view of the world and where we were headed and what it was like. And if I could have inserted you into it, it would have made it better, and lo and behold, you do in fact exist, and yay.
No, for sure. It's always surprising, but surprising in a way that kind of keeps our cynicism or our sarcasm at bay. Like a lot of times I think we tend to, just be a little bit dismissive of reality. We feel as if we've seen enough of it to know that it's just not that good. And then it keeps crashing in on us in such a way that we have to be open to the prospect that there are other people out there doing, not just doing, but being wonderful, not just doing wonderful things, but being wonderful people. And that broadens our horizons or opens up our experience in such a way. Like we can't say, I'm going to close the door on this. I'm going to close on it just keeps being good. It just keeps being beautiful.
If you like that clip, be sure to like and subscribe. Cheers.